Now let's try this. Is that better? Yeah. It helps when you unmute the microphone. Doop. Just goes to show it happens to even the best of us. So as I was saying, I hope everybody's week is going well. It's going good here. Lots of stuff going on at work and some traveling maybe here in the future. I get to go do some training here shortly. So actually, I get to be the trainee this time, not the trainer. Hey, Bill, how you doing, buddy? Yeah, I get to be the trainee this time, not the trainer. Hello, Lisa, how you doing? Which is going to be kind of unusual. The funny thing is when I sit in a class, I'm really taking two classes, right? Now think about this. I'm a professional trainer. So when I'm sitting in the class, I'm learning the curriculum, but I'm also watching the instructor and I'm watching what they're doing. I'm trying to pick up some tips and tricks that trainer may have so I can apply it to myself and become a better trainer myself. So I'm actually taking two classes for the price of one. So that's pretty cool. So yeah, I see that George says my white balance is off a little bit. It's actually not the white balance. I've got to fix the laptop. For some reason, if we put it in the shop and when we came back, you can't adjust the screen on it. So it's off a little bit. So what's everybody drinking tonight? That's the next thing we always go into. What's everybody drinking? Tonight, Chuck is drinking water. I realized earlier, hello, Chris. I realized earlier that I haven't had enough water today. So I am drinking lots of water today. Make sure you put, it's nice cold water too. Why does water taste better when you put it in a container in the refrigerator and it's nice and cold when you drink it as opposed to just drinking it from the tap? Why is that? So Steve says he's also drinking water. George, what are you drinking? Chris, what are you drinking? Lisa, what are you drinking? Make sure you put it in the comment box here on the side. So yeah, drinking water today. I'm kind of way behind. So Bill is drinking blueberry wheat ale. Is that a local thing there, Bill? That sounds actually pretty good. And so we got a LinkedIn user drinking black tea. It's very cool. And Arnold Palmer from Chick-fil-A. Oh, I got a funny story about Arnold Palmer. My wife and I, about a year ago, we went to a Mexican restaurant, a small little Mexican restaurant. And I love Arnold Palmer's. For those who don't know, it's half lemonade, half tea. So we go into this Mexican restaurant, we're sitting down and we order the drinks, and I just tell them I want an Arnold Palmer. And it was really slow. It's just my wife and I in the place. And so so the lady goes in the back, and I hear her say to the guy, "Do we have any Arnold Palmers?" And the guy goes, "No, I don't think we carry that." And then she comes back up, "So I'm sorry, sir, we don't carry Arnold Palmers." I'm like, "An Arnold Palmer is just half lemonade, half tea." She goes, "Oh." Dope. Yep, it happens to the best of us. It really, really does. Arnold Palmers are the best. So she says it's from a small brewery in northern Wisconsin. Would they sell that in Green Bay, Bill? Because I've got a potential class in Green Bay coming up in a month or so, provided I can get students for it. And if they have it there, I want to try that because that sounds actually pretty good. Pretty good. All right, so the next thing I always want to start off with is the Acronym Challenge. Acronym Challenge. What does RG stand for? If you think you know, put it in the chat box. What does RG stand for? I'll give you a hint. It has something to do with coax cable. I know Steve will answer this because Steve's in the ham radio, so he probably knows this. And of course, I got to do my public service announcement. Help control the acronym population. Please have your acronym spayed or neutered. We have enough acronyms. We don't need any more. All right, so what does RG stand for, right? RG. What could it stand for? I'll give you, again, I gave you hints. As with cabling, coax cabling specifically. So RG stands for regulated, darn, I just forgot it. Regulated government? Regulated government. So RG6, that's what it stands for, right? So there's your acronym for the day. And I don't know if you've been watching the feed lately. I've got stickers. Yes. Help support the show. If you want a sticker so you can put it on your hard hat, you can put it on your drink. Make sure that I'll put the link in the chat box where you can go purchase one. I'll do it right now before I forget. Radio Guide. No, it's not Radio Guide. So this is where you go to buy those stickers. It's regulated government, I think. Oh, you know what? Here, we'll just settle this argument right here now. Let me just pull up my Bixby TDMM real quick. And I'll pull up the acronyms really stinking quick. You think I'd have these memorized. Just goes to show you, as soon as you hit the live button, that's when things go wrong, right? As soon as you hit the live button. So we'll go to the TDMM, go to the acronym section, which is at the very beginning of the book. And then we'll scroll down to the R's. And I'm pretty sure it's regulated government. Pretty sure. ILMNOP. The first person who gets it correct, I will send you a $25 Amazon gift card. First person who gets it correct, according to what the TDMM says, RG stands for. PQR. Where is it? R. There we go. RG. Oh, nope. I was totally wrong. It stands for radio grade. Bill, you win a $25 Amazon gift card. Direct message me on LinkedIn. Give me your email address and I'll send it to you probably next day or so. That's what you get for getting the acronym correct. It's radio grade. Radio grade. Very good. So yeah, we have the stickers. Make sure that you go by and buy one, help support the channel, because it costs money to run the servers and all that other stuff that we have here on the show. Nothing is for free, right? Nothing is for free. So Bill wins the acronym challenge, and he gets $25 for Amazon gift card. Mark is in the house. Hello, Mark. What are you drinking there, buddy? So let's get on with some of our questions, because I had 4 of them submitted ahead of time. So if you have a question, make sure that you put it in the comment box. Remember, I am a one-man show, so I got to go back and forth between the comments and stuff. So I'm a little slow that way. But I do have an assistant. I hired a new assistant to help me. The pay's pretty cheap. I only have to pay her in kisses. It's my wife. But she's not here today. She's actually out of town on a business trip. So next week, she'll be running the back behind-the-scenes stuff, doing the chat box. So I can focus directly on the show. So it's radio grade. So here's our first question. So our first question is from Mark. Mark is in Virginia. And Mark asked us, he says, I work in the DC area and I want to get a better paying job. Those seem to need a security clearance. Where can I get one? Here's the thing about security clearances, Mike. They're not like pay money and get one. Okay. You just can't get them. You have to be already working for a company in a role that requires that security clearance. They just don't give them out. Right. So you have to be in that role already. You have to have what's called a sponsoring agency. And they're the ones who are going to basically bear the cost of the investigation. There are generally 3 types of clearances, right? You have the confidential, the secret, and the top secret. Now, there are some other ones out there, but they're going to be specific to just those kinds of agencies. And I usually have a couple of those when I was working for Hinkles McCoy a long, long time ago. So let's talk about those security clearances. So there's a form that you're going to have to fill out once you got that role. You have to show the government there's a need for you to have that security clearance. Now, some people think, well, if you have that security clearance, you're going to be having an access to secure and classified information. That's maybe not necessarily true, but you're going to be certainly in an area where you might be exposed to seeing classified information or seeing something that is classified. That's why they require those security clearances. And so there's a form that you got to fill out. Which form depends on which level of security clearance that you want. Make sure you fill that form out completely and honestly. Don't hide anything, because trust me, they will find out. Now, when I got my security clearance, I just had gone through a pretty bad divorce. So my finances weren't exactly the best in the world. They weren't horrible, but going through a divorce, as you can imagine, there was some financial things going on. I was straight out flat with them. I told them, hey, here's my financial history. Here's how I'm working to clear it, because they will investigate it. Now, when I got my clearance, and because my clearance was actually a TS clearance. I don't know if it's just for TSs, but the FBI came out and investigated me, and they went to my ex-wife's house. They talked to her. They talked to everybody listening to the thing. They went to my neighbor's house. So pro tip number 1, if you're filling out to get a security clearance, make sure your neighbors know that you're getting a security clearance and that the government might be coming by to ask a few questions because I forgot to tell my neighbors. And literally, like the next day when they saw me come back from a road trip, my friend came and was, man, what'd you do? The government was here looking for you. The FBI was asking all kinds of crazy questions about you. I was like, yeah, I filled out an application for security clearance. He goes, oh, we thought you were all cool and stuff. I was like, no. And don't hide anything. Don't hide anything. And don't think just because your background, your financial background could exclude you. It can, but they do have some leeway. And if you show a pathway that you're actually working on that, they'll actually help you kind of work through that scenario. Which I was kind of concerned. I was surprised when they gave me my TS clearance, by the way. So I got it, and I got to see some pretty cool stuff. So there's the answer to your question, Mr. Mike. If you have another question about security clearances, make sure that you kind of put them in there. And so the next question is, whoops, went to the wrong thing there. Question number 2, and this one's from Andy in South Carolina. Andy asks, what does it mean when they say a connector is IDC style? IDC style. IDC is another acronym and stands for Insulation Displacement Contact. Insulation Displacement Contact. So what that means is you terminate the cable by displacing the insulation. Now, prior to IDC jacks, the jacks had these screws on the back of them. And you had to take your screwdriver, you had to back out the screw. You had to take your cable, you had to strip off the jacket. You had to strip off the dielectric off each conductor, wrap that around the screw, and then you had to tighten that down. And you had to do that for every one of those conductors. Okay. Then they came out with the IDC jacks. So some examples of IDC jacks: patch panels, connectors, 66 blocks, 110 blocks, Crone blocks, Bix blocks. Did you know what's another name for a Crone block? Anybody know? There's a 3-letter acronym for a Crone block. Let's see if anybody knows what that acronym is. And so what happens is when you put that conductor in the termination field, when you punch it down with the punch tool, it pushes the conductor between the 2 pins and displaces the insulation. And then that gives you what's called a cold weld or a spark-free type of connection. So you don't have to worry about any kind of sparks, which is really critical for like connectors in battery backup rooms and stuff like that. Right. So there's a whole bunch of kinds out there. And the advantage of the IDC jacks is you can terminate them a lot faster than you can the old screw down jacks. The old screw down jacks, we were estimating each one of those jacks about 5 minutes to terminate each one because you had to strip off the dielectric off everything and wrap it and cut off the excess. With the IDC jacks, it's not uncommon for an estimator to figure about 3 minutes or sometimes even less for an IDC style jack. Now, so what you do have to be careful with an IDC style termination. If you punch it down, you have your punch tool set on high on something that's got a printed circuit board inside of it, like a jack or a patch panel, you could damage that printed circuit board. So when you're terminating an IDC that has that printed circuit board inside of it, your punch tool really should be set on the low position. And that's going to keep you from having any of those kinds of issues. Okay, so that's the IDC. So then the third question, there we go. I was recently promoted to area manager. This is coming from Doug in Texas. And he says, can you help recommend any good books on leadership? Any good books on leadership? So the best book that I've read on leadership, hey, if you know a good book on leadership, put it in the comments, in the comment section. Let's help out Doug. So the best one that I think that I ever read was called Good to Great, or Great to Good. No, Good to Great by Jim Collins. And it was actually loaned to me by a close friend, Ken Fox. Ken, I don't have the book anymore. I kind of lost it, so I owe you for the book. He loaned it to me. I forgot to give it back, and I've recently lost it in somewhere or something. And it's a really, really good book. It talks about how companies go from being good companies to being great companies. And this is not just from him just writing this. He actually did research. He researched like 140,000 different companies going back over 40 years into their history, and then found out how they were doing mediocre or good, and all of a sudden they went to great. And he came up with a couple different kinds of theories. One's called the flywheel theory. And the flywheel theory is really talking about momentum, how once you get the momentum going, you can keep it going, and it'll become self-perpetuating. But my favorite one that I read, and I think he called it the bus analogy. The bus analogy. And this is where it ties into leadership. And he's talking about you always hear you got to pick the right person, right? And that's why I tell people all the time when you're doing job interviews, remember, you're interviewing the company as much as they're interviewing you. It's got to be a good fit all the way around. So the company wants to pick the right person, but it's not a matter of just picking the right person. You got to put the right person in the right seat on the bus, the right person on the right seat of the bus. All right, I'll give you an example. If that person's a really skilled person at, at something other than driving, you put him in the driver's seat, well, that bus is going to crash. Doesn't matter how good he was in the other things. So it's not just a matter of getting the right people. It's putting the right people in the right spot, and then also nourishing them to help them become better at their positions, right? So it's a really good book. I do highly recommend that you read it. And I'm pretty sure it is Jim Collins. Let me just check my notes here. Yep, spanning 40 years. Yep, it was Jim Collins. And like I said, I don't have an actual hard copy of that book anymore, but it is a great book. He has some other books. I should probably read them because I did like that first one. Right? Question number 4. And this is coming from Gary in Mississippi. Gary's asking, do you have any tips for designing pathways for horizontal cabling? Tips for installing pathways for horizontal cabling. That's a very broad question, because when you look at supporting cables, there's 2 general kinds of ways that you can support cabling in the ceiling for horizontal cabling. You can use a continuous pathway or a non-continuous pathway. Each one has benefits and drawbacks. For example, a continuous pathway would be basket tray, ladder rack, cable tray. So you're putting an entire section. The cable supported the entire pathway. Discontinuous, or not discontinuous, the other one we put in is J-hooks, right? They're not being supported the entire pathway. They'd be supporting every 4 to 5 feet at random distances. By the way, we don't call them J-hooks. They're called open top carriers. That's a discontinuous type of support system. Now, the advantage and disadvantages. So the advantage of the continuous support system is once it's installed, it provides way more support, can usually handle a lot more cable. The disadvantage to a continuous support system is, number one, if you didn't design it correctly and you have to go back and you have to add to it after the customer's already moved in, it's really hard to put in 8-foot sections of cable tray or basket tray in a ceiling that's already there with people in the room working, right? Because you have to tear out a lot of that ceiling to do that. And that's where the non-continuous support really comes into play. I keep saying discontinuous because that's one of our cables. It's non-continuous support. So no support, you're putting in J-hooks or some other type of means. So you don't have to access the ceiling where you need to put that support. Now the disadvantage there is, you're really only supporting the cable, 4 inches or so? And that's why we tell people you should support them 4 to 5 feet apart at random distances, because you're putting a lot of weight on those ones on the bottom. Right? You can put them in closer together if you want, but that's a lot more money, materials, and labors. So each one has its benefits and its drawbacks. Now, the benefits of the non-continuous support is if you have to add more pathway space in that ceiling after the customer's already moved in, that's easy. You just pop out the tile and you just kind of put it in. But so make sure that you understand which one you can put in. Then the next thing you really want to make sure you understand is make sure you understand how your authority having jurisdiction is going to be inspecting that pathway, because they may be expecting for different types of things, looking for different things. You'll know this from working with the AHJs in your area, right? And you'll know which ones they prefer, which ones they don't prefer. And make sure you follow that code to the letter. And especially like for the cable tray systems and the ladder rack systems, the code book says that you got to support them in a manner consistent with the instructions. So that basically means you got to read the instructions, and they'll tell you generally no more than 5 feet between supports, and you got to have the support within 2 inches of each side of a joint. And so you got to make sure that you follow those, and make sure you don't overfill them as well. So make sure that you follow the authority having jurisdiction when you're doing that. You also have to understand that what kind of cables you're going to be putting in them, right? Because different cables have different effects on other cables, both electrically and weight-wise. For example, Cat 6A cable is twice as heavy as Cat 5E, right? So if you're pulling a big bundle of Cat 6A cable in a cable tray system on top of some other cables, you're taking a risk of getting what's called cable burn. Cable burn, that's where bundles literally, because of friction, will burn through the jacket as you pull it through the pathway system and damage the cables, right? So you might want to have separate pathways, maybe one for the heavier stuff. When we used to do ours, if we were doing a project, we were doing both backbone cable and horizontal cable. We always pulled the backbone cable first, and we put that on the bottom of the tray, right? Now, if it was only just one or two, then we just kind of put it to the side. But a lot of times we would spread it across the whole entire bottom, and then we put our horizontal cables in across the top. And that just kind of helps solve those issues with the cable burn. And then the other thing is you got to watch out is for your fill ratios. And you got to go by what the manufacturer instructions tell you. And just keep in mind that you're doing what's called the visual fill. Right? So when you get done, you don't want to have more than, let's see if I can quote the standards off the top of my head. You don't want to have more than 25% fill after the initial install. That gives the customer room for another 25% to grow to a maximum of 50%. Now, when you're putting your pathways, when you're designing a pathway, keep in mind that pathway is going to be there for the lifespan of the building. That could be 50 to 75 years. The average cable plant's lifespan is 7 to 10 years generally. So you got to really, really watch out for that. Because do you know what size category 15 cable is going to be? I don't, and most people don't. So we don't know what size it's going to be. So you got to make sure that you design for that, because it's going to really cause problems in the long run, right? So, and then also you want to make sure that when you're designing that system, that when you design it, you give enough room above the cable tray so people can get into it and work. And then also even after moves, adds, and changes. For example, when you're given the floor plans, especially if it's like an open office environment, you got modular furniture and stuff, try, if you can, to have the trunk runs, which are going to be going down the cable runway. I mean, the trunk runs, which are going to be going down the cable trays, going down the hallways between the modular furniture. That way you're not trying to get into the ceiling above people's desks. And then have the branch runs that come off of that go to the actual drops. So that's what I'm talking about. You got to think about designing those things in advance. And then when you're designing your support system, especially if you're using the continuous support, try to stick with one manufacturer and use all their parts and stuff, because generally it's going to be UL rated, and you want to make sure that you can maintain that UL rating. So those are those things that I had for the thing. So we had some comments come in, and low generation, do fiber optics. So Phil's in the house. Phil says he's in Georgia at a nuclear plant doing some fiber optics. Oh, that's pretty cool, Phil. That is pretty cool. Mark's working late. Mark's always working late. He's always working late. Mark's a hardworking person. And let me see if I have any other questions in here. So SF86, yeah, that's the form. Yes, that's the actual form for the. Oh, my banner's still on. Why is my banner still on? Let me turn it off. I'm sorry. I can't wait till my assistant starts next week. I don't have these glitches like this. Right. So there's more than one form though, George. George says SF86. There's also an SF85 and some other. It depends on which clearance that you're actually trying to get to, as which one you're actually going to fill out, right? LSA, yes, that is the acronym, Bill. I asked what was the acronym for the Corona block. But what does LSA stand for? Anybody know? I had to actually write it down. I knew some German thing. It's Lathrophy Schabrufri Arabrifrisi. I don't speak German, but anyways, yeah, absolutely. So it does have an acronym, and you'll see that as well, LSA. So let's see if we have any other questions that people have put in the question box while I was answering those other two questions. So let's see. Steve has first break all the rules by break. Oh, that for a book. Very good. I'm going to have to check that one out, Steve. That sounds like a good book, right? And let me see. So Patty chimes in. I'm correct saying using non-continuous support cuts initial costs. There are implications in labor in those pathways over cable tray and conduit. Well, I am correct in saying that non-continuous support cuts the initial cost. It does, because it's cheaper, and it's cheaper in labor and cheaper material in those pathways over cable tray and conduit. Yes, it's definitely cheaper. It's definitely cheaper. But you really got to kind of really think about how many cables they're putting in the ceiling. The general rule of thumb is you want to try to put no more than 50 cables in a J-hook. Because if you put more than 50 cables in a J-hook, what happens is then those cables on the bottom get crushed, and that could cause a harmonic disruption, which is a disruption of the sinusoidal wave, if you put those J hooks at exact distances. And they do make J hooks that can handle more than 50 cables. So a lot of times we get tempted to overfill them, and those cables still in the bottom get crushed. So that's always the drawback to the non-continuous type of support systems. So that's why my preferred method was always to do a basket tray or cable tray down for the trunk, and then J hooks for the branch runs off of that. That way I'm not overloading the J hooks and stuff. So there we go. So let's see, another thing comes in. What is the best way to learn codes for your area when you're in a new role of a project manager? Cable Dog Supreme. The first thing is get a copy of the code book, read the code book, research the code book, look up, watch any of the videos that we did on the code. We just did a video on Article 645. Patty, I found that error that you pointed out to me. I have to change the graphic. Article 645, which is the section that talks about information technology equipment and information technology equipment rooms. And I had my code expert, Tim Coleman, come on and help me with that. It's a really, really good one. So the first thing is to make sure that you get a copy of the code book and you read the code book. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, when you read the code book, it's going to just literally confuse you because it's not written in layman's terms. Then that's why you want to look up things like, again, when I post this show on the page, on the Let's Talk Cabling page, I will put a link underneath the show for some resources on help to interpret the code. Right? Mike Holt is one of them. Mike Holt actually lives here in Florida. He lives over in Orlando. But there are some other ones. So I'll put the links when I post this on the webpage. So that way it's there for you. But keep in mind, it's not a matter of what Chuck thinks. It's not a matter of what Mike Holt thinks over there in Orlando. It doesn't matter what Tim Coleman thinks I think he's in Portland, if I remember right. It doesn't matter what he says. It matters what that authority have in jurisdiction. So the good first step is knowing what's in the code book. The second step is knowing how your local AHJ interprets that code book. Okay, because that's what really boils down to, right? It really does. So let's see, Patty's chiming in. I believe installing J hooks is more expensive. I've already answered that question. Oops, sorry about that. I don't know what's going on there. So there we go. So we are at 6:28. I do have 2 minutes. 2 minutes. If you got really fast typing fingers, type in one more question. I'll give you a couple seconds. And while we're waiting, I'll remind you again, don't forget to go by and buy one of our stickers. Okay? Don't forget to buy one of our stickers. Help support the channel. Help pay for the cost for Canva to make graphics, the cost for the podcasting hosting service, the cost for everything. Everybody wants a chunk of Chuck when he's doing podcasts, it seems like. Yeah, so make sure you buy that sticker. So, okay, 1 minute left. Does anybody have any questions, comments, concerns, funny stories, funny anecdotes? Okay. All right, well, let's go ahead and cut it 1 minute early. I'm going to go ahead and run up to I told you my wife's not here tonight. She's on a business trip. So I'm going to run up to the Mexican restaurant and have me some Mexican food for dinner because I love Mexican food. So until next time, everybody, be safe. And make sure to submit your questions early for next week. Oh, by the way, on Thursday, August 19th, there will not be a Thursday night show. There will not be a Thursday night show. I'm going to be traveling back from my training section of my training class where I'm getting taught how to do something, and I won't make it back in time to do the show. So there won't be one on the 19th. So, all righty, everybody. I appreciate the good show. Thank you, Mr. Steven. I loved your show as well. If you guys have time on Thursdays at noon Eastern Standard Time, check out my buddy Steve's new podcast he's doing. He's on LinkedIn. Just hop on there. He's a really good show. Really good show. So, but till next time, everybody, be safe.